Well, good afternoon, friends, and very warm welcome to you all, and to our friends on Skype who are joining from all around the world. So this afternoon we have a seminar on dreaming and premonitions. Now, dreaming is something that's being studied as one of the states of consciousness increasingly more actively in science, and Theosophy has a lot to say about dreaming. So today we're going to investigate what happens when you dream, what's actually going on in those different states of consciousness, what's happening in your mind, and also the brain, which is part of the question of dreaming, but isn't the whole answer. One of the ideas that Theosophy teaches is that consciousness is universal. Consciousness is everywhere. And it is on many different planes. Currently, we're all in the waking state, the plane of physical consciousness, using our senses, physical senses. But there are many states of consciousness above that. And each state of consciousness, each plane, has its own perceptions, its own faculties of sensing what's there, its own capacities. We're all familiar with the psychic and astral planes, which are the planes of emotions, feelings, good and bad, selfish, altruistic feelings, all those things. Above that, there's the plane of the intellect and rationality. And above that, there's the spiritual plane. Plato described it in terms of truth, beauty, goodness, harmony, justice, fairness, compassion. All those attributes are really largely spiritual attributes. And they exist within us, but on our highest plane of consciousness. And during dreams, we go up and down through all those planes many times every night. And as we go up and down those planes, we get different perceptions and different messages. And what we know, or what we remember of our dreams, is simply our recollection of what we've experienced. And very often dreams are confused and we have very poor recollection. It's not perhaps because the dream itself was meaningless, but that we haven't managed to create the right soil, if you like, for those memories to actually be brought back into our waking consciousness. They get scrambled up. So those are some of the ideas that we're going to be discussing in detail today. There's going to be two talks and two study sessions one following each talk. The first talk will be for 20 minutes, and it'll be on the subject of what happens during sleep, mostly from a theosophical point of view. And then there'll be a study session which we're going to read the second and the third pages of the handout. And we'll have a chance for lots of questions and discussion during that study period after the first talk. And then there'll be another talk which is on premonitions and recent research into dreams. And that'll be followed by a similar study session. Actually, there'll be a break after the second talk for 25 minutes. And then at 5 o'clock, we'll have the second study session where we'll study the last 4 pages of the handout. So that's the overview of this afternoon's seminar. we ought to just say we've got a meeting tomorrow on Sunday at 7 p.m. Here and on Skype at the same time. And the subject is some modern views on consciousness. Now, those topics that are going to come up tomorrow evening are quite closely connected with what we're studying today, which is just a phase of consciousness. So you're very welcome to come to that. It'll partly cover the ideas of panpsychism. Some of you will know that term. It's well, it's very similar to the idea of the whole of nature being conscious. Panpsychism. So that'll be tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. So I think those are about all the announcements we need to make at the beginning. So the first talk is going to be given by Anya, who's on Skype.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We can share. I've got your handouts, Anya. If you'd like, I can share those.
Have you got the slides?
Oh, sorry, the slides. Yeah. Yeah. Let me share screens. Not sure if everyone.
Start with.
There we are. Just move him out of the way. Can you see that, all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very good, Will.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Okay, so over to Anya for the first talk.
Yes, thank you very much for your introduction, Will. Partially, you've done a little bit of the job for me, but I will slowly go through whatever theosophy talks and teaches about dreams and dreaming, about different states of consciousness. I'm going also to talk about why it is important to pay attention to our dreams, why we need to sleep. I'm going to only mention quite superficially the topic of different dreams, different types of dreams, and then in my quotes we are going to look at what exactly Helena Petrovna Blavatsky wrote about those different types of dreams in the transactions. And then I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to give a few examples of different dreams, and perhaps our audience can help to recognize the type of dream they represent. And finally, I believe we can just, if people are willing to, we can share some of our experiences. Maybe someone would like to add something, unless you prefer, Will, to do it after the quotes, during the answers and questions and answers phase. But well, let's start. I don't think there is anyone in our meeting today that could claim not to have any experience of dreaming. It's part of who we are. And not only humans dream, but also animals dream as well. So it is a phenomenon that occurs regularly, and one can ask questions. What is it? What's actually happening? And there is a common belief that dreams is just a confused mixture of images and ideas produced by our physical brain. But is it really? Okay. Throughout history, there has been much attention paid to dreams and dreaming by sages of all ages and of all races. And indeed, Theosophy indicates that through a thorough understanding of what goes on in these states, we might gain much insights into many of the other functions and processes of human evolution. Also, once we understand what dreams are and who does the dreaming and what part we are playing during this time, we will find ourselves in possession of a key to many of the mysteries of life and the answers to many of our problems. What needs to be stressed here is the fact that, as a general rule, we are the only ones who can really, truly interpret our dreams. Yes, we might consult people, look for advice in different books, but really we need to trust our intuition more than anything else. Because what comes through to us from the ego on waking has to be put into terms with which the personality is familiar. Okay, until we can read the language of the ego, we have to use perhaps other means to decipher the meaning of our dreams. When I mentioned our personalities, I'm talking about our background, for example, cultural background. Dreams will use certain images, certain ideas that we are familiar with from our waking life. So, for example, a Christian might dream about Virgin Mary, but perhaps a Hindu person might dream of Sarasvati or Lakshmi or another god or goddess from their pantheon. Yes, because dreams will use what is naturally stored in our consciousness or subconsciousness. Okay? So depending on what's stored there, we need to rely on our intuition to be able to actually understand the meaning hidden behind. Okay. Another important thing that one must understand is that during the sleep of the body, the ego, with a capital E, is active on its own plane, doing, thinking, operating on a plane that is quite different from the one we are on during the waking state. It's just a different state of consciousness. We must then understand that the ego is ever trying to impress us with the truth from that plane. But that it depends upon us at this end to tune into the nature of that more universal world. Another thing worth highlighting, perhaps at the beginning of this talk, is that there is a common belief, commonly accepted belief, that the necessity for sleeping stems from the fact that we might be running out of steam, or in other words, out of vitality. Yes, that we start to lack energy after a busy day. It is actually a misconception that William Q. Judge clarifies by saying that, according to Theosophy, just the opposite is the truth. For instead of having suffered a loss of vitality, the body at the conclusion of the day has more life in it than when it waked. During the waking state, the life waves rush into the body with greater intensity every hour. Yes, and we, being unable to resist them any longer, become overpowered by them, and as a result, fall asleep. While sleeping, the light waves adjust themselves to the molecules of the body, and when the equilibrium is complete, we again wake to continue the contest with life. If this periodical adjustment did not occur, the life current would simply destroy us. It is quite, there's a lot of food for thought, yes? And well, basically, we can state that the life currents have natural tendency to remain in their more universal state, yes, but to remain alive, or awake, we have to resist this tendency and alter to our bodily needs, to adjust our bodily needs. And this process of adjustment relies on our astral body. It is this resistance that tires us out, not the loss of life force. Yes, life is everywhere and in everything, and we can harness it as long as we can. But of course, the moment comes when we can't handle it anymore and we simply fall asleep. So what does actually happen when we sleep? Yes, let's think about what takes place when we fall asleep. Well, can we have the second slide, please? There's a very simple diagram. Thank you so much. It is evident to all that every 24 hours we pass through two states, as we know. We know there is the waking state and the sleeping state. If we look a little bit further, and you can see it on this diagram in front of you, the sleeping state, yes, this sleeping period itself is divided into two states, the dreaming state and the state of dreamless sleep. In Sanskrit, two words are used for those two different sleeping states, Swapna and Shushupti, whereas the waking state is called Jagrata. And the Jagrata state is our ordinary waking consciousness. It is the one in which we must be regenerated, where we must come to a full consciousness of the self within for, okay, sorry, okay, no, okay, just going back a little bit. Yes, Jagrata is our ordinary waking consciousness. And we regenerate actually during the dreamless sleep, but maybe little by little, we'll get to it. Jagrata acts on Swapna being this intermediate state. It's Swapna that actually produces dreams and different suggestions that often we can carry through to our waking consciousness. It might disturb the instructions, yes, that might come down from the higher state, or might aid the person through waking calmness and concentration. It might, however, get a little bit distorted, yes, because it's only an intermediate state. It's highly psychic in its nature. However, in order to get to the state of Shushupti, the dreamless state, which is actually where the regeneration takes place, it's inevitable for us to pass through the state of Swapna, the dreaming state, the psychic state. During the Shushupti state, we tend to relax, we tend to regenerate. It's called the dreamless state. But really, the dreamless doesn't mean that our ego becomes inactive, as I've said before. Our ego remains active. It might receive instructions, it might receive information. Depending on our evolutionary state, we might be able to translate it into our waking consciousness or not. The truth is that a lot of people only hold on to the memory from the intermediate state, from this Swapna stage. Let me just quote something from William Q. Judge. from his article, The Three Planes of Human Life. The translation, dreamless sleep, actually, he says, is inadequate. For while it is dreamless, it is also a state in which even criminals commune through the higher nature with spiritual beings and enter into their spiritual plane. It is the great spiritual reservoir by means of which the tremendous momentum toward evil living is held in check. And because it is involuntary with them, it is constantly salutary in its effect. So we're talking about those beneficent effects of getting into this deep, profound, dreamless, in inverted commas, stage of our existence. Another term sometimes used is the banquet of the gods. Okay, it says that our ego, with the capital E, participates in the banquet of the gods, meaning that this is their place, this is the time when we can commune with high spiritual beings. However, after this type of communion, one has to return to waking state, and he can get back by no other road but through the Shushupti stage. Okay, so through the Swapna stage from Shushupti. Therefore, before we fall into the deep, profound sleep, we go through Swapna, we get to Shushupti, and on the way back, we again come back through Swapna to Jagrata, to the waking stage of consciousness. Knowing this process might help us a little bit with understanding different types of dreams. And we are going to look at 7 different types of dreams that HPB wrote about in the Transactions in a second. But just to give you an overview, we might have, for example, retrospective dreams, yes, in which memories we have might be recovered and come to life. There might be prospective dreams, yes, in which events, persons, landscapes, and so on are encountered with the smallest details possible, yes, like imprinted. We might have also dreams that give us solutions to mathematical, abstract, or even personal problems. And perhaps we might have other type of division. We might have recurrent dreams, yes, that very often might be related to our past lives. We might even have dreams when we ourselves become conscious of being in a dream. And that's what's very often referred to as lucid dreaming. Could we have the third slide? I just would like to mention 4 different personalities, actually, who had these experiences. For example, in the first picture, we see Mark Twain, and in The Lookout, he tells of a prophetic dream. Well, perhaps Lookout was not written by him, but we hear in The Lookout about this dream that Mark Twain actually wrote about. And it was related to the death of his brother on a riverboat that blew up on the Mississippi River. Yes, and he wrote that it actually occurred exactly as he saw it in his dream. Then we've got Sir Victor Goddard, was an air marshal in the second picture. And he recorded a dream yes, where he got involved in a plane crash himself. Now, this information came from a stranger who actually spoke to Goddard, and he informed him that he would participate in this plane crash. And Air Marshal did not really pay any attention to it until the day came when everything that he heard of started to materialize as he was up in the air. And basically, remembering this warning that he received, he managed the situation in such a way that allowed him to stay calm, to give certain instructions to the crew of the airplane, and thanks to this warning, he actually minimized the effects of the crash. So the airplane crashed, but we know that there were no serious injuries involved in it. I believe that there is another example of Professor Archibald Sayce, who and his case was mentioned in Washington Post at the beginning of the 20th century in 1926 and 1927. And he was looking for a solution in his dreams to interpret a Babylonian cylinder. And he's been pondering upon this problem for obviously many sleepless nights, perhaps, yes. And then suddenly he received a piece of information that served him, that explained this particular cylinder and the meaning of the inscriptions and the reliefs. And he could then present it to his colleagues. That actually makes me think about many other scientists of the classical era and modern times, and I kind of added to this slide a person that I know personally, Onyx Ashanti, who's a musician, an American musician and an inventor, and who basically told me that as he was inventing his new musical systems, and he started using programming that's called pure data, where you actually use algorithms to create your own programs and so on and so forth. So you, from scratch, start your own programming. And he was trying to use wireless connection between the equipment, pieces of equipment that he used for his hands, that would then reflect to certain mouthpiece he was holding in his mouth and so on and so forth. But obviously he had trouble with algorithm and how to make it work and so on and so forth. He slept, he received many of the answers in his dream, and then on the waking in the morning he would just start implementing it in his work, and actually things worked perfectly for him. And yeah, he still creates in Detroit, I believe, in the States. So I know of many other people who also told me about similar examples, experiences. I know of people who, for example, artists, painters, that might only after a fully busy day painting feel like they can access those very deep Shushupti state, because they feel like they've done the best they could during the day. So yes, so I'm sure you've got a lot of examples like this yourself. My time has come to an end, so I'm going to stop here, and perhaps we can see the quotes and then have questions and answers.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Anya. That was a very interesting tour of the dreaming states. Well, are there any questions initially before we go to the study of the text? We covered a lot of ground in that. Okay. Nobody on Skype. I think there's a Skype chat message I was just having a look at. Let's see.
I have a question, if I could ask it.
Yeah.
Well, there was the area where you were talking about the life current and are resisting it. And I was curious, what is actually resisting that life current? I didn't quite catch that.
Okay, no problem. Shall I repeat it, Will? Or would you like to explain it?
Yeah. It's not an easy question, actually. But have a go, Anya. Yeah.
I'll try. I mean, we are all students, so we can only try. I believe, as far as I understand William Q. Judge, because it was William Q. Judge that spoke about it, actually, we have more energy at the end of the day. We are filled to the brink with this life force that surrounds us, that's everywhere. Yes? And if we don't go to sleep, it will destroy it because we absorb more and more of it. So the only way of resisting this distraction is being able to go to sleep, to leave our body calm and restful and let our ego travel to other planes, to their own proper planes, where it gets regenerated, recharged. And in that way, we resist this current of life. Does it make sense? And so how we can resist it? By going to sleep, by trying to relax, by letting go of our problems. I think, I'm not sure whether I mentioned it, but very important way of helping ourselves to achieve this regeneration is going to sleep in the right state of mind. So we can prepare ourselves for dreaming, for our sleeping time. We can just focus, draw attention to something peaceful, something calm. Obviously, the more elevated our thoughts would be, the better for us. And this is like this is when we are helping our ego to rise up, you know, and in a way we are consciously helping it to resist this life current. Does it make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I was just curious as to, so is there a way in which our bodies can be made more able to not be in a state of resistance, or is there a process that we go through that might occur?
Well, I think we can, through meditation practice, through exercises, relaxing exercising, we are already preparing our mind for this state. We are already resisting. So when there are thought currents going through people's minds, people sometimes get stressed, more stressed, and then they suffer anxieties, and then they even complain of insomnia. They can't fall asleep because of this constant rush of thought. Yes, which means they lack those tools that might help them this current, resist this current, calm down their minds, go into this sleeping state, and perhaps achieve those higher states, dreamless states of consciousness called shushupti. Yes, I think there are ways of doing it. We can resist it consciously. Yes, we just need to become aware of it, how it functions, how it works. But please, Will, if you have something.
Well, I think that's right. So let's go on to the text, because I think some of these questions will be answered during our study. So has everyone got, it's page 2 of the handout, what happens during sleep? So we'll read this together in a couple of sections, and then we can discuss what comes up. Would someone at the lodge like to read to begin with? the Theosophical perspective. Any volunteers? Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
So, study text for talk 1. What happens during sleep? The Theosophical perspective refers to the 3 main states of dreaming: waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. Note particularly the distinction and interrelation between the dreaming and dreamless. First comes the swapna, or dreaming state, and this leads to the sushupti, physical sleep. It's a necessity in order that the senses may recuperate and obtain a new lease of life for the jagrata, or waking state, from the swapna and sushupti. According to Raja Yoga, Turiya is the highest state. Sleep is a sign that waking life has become too strong for the physical organism, and that the force of the life current must be broken by changing the waking for the sleeping state. Ask a good clairvoyant to describe the aura of a person just refreshed by sleep, and that of another just before going to sleep. The former will be seen bathed in rhythmical vibration of life currents, golden, blue, and rosy. These are the electrical waves of life. The latter, at the end of the day, is, as it were, in a mist of intense golden orange hue, composed of atoms whirling with an almost incredible spasmodic rapidity, showing that the person begins to be too strongly saturated with life, prana. The life essence is too strong for his physical organs, and he must seek relief in a shadowy side of that essence. Which side is the dream element, or physical sleep, one of the states of consciousness. So that was from Transaction of the Blavatsky Lodge, page 71. The nature and function of real dreams cannot be understood unless we admit the existence of an immortal ego in mortal man, independent of the physical body.
Down.
Sorry, you saying?
Someone was on Skype.
Yes, can we scroll down the text?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just a second. Yeah, there we are.
The nature and function of real dreams cannot be understood unless we admit the existence of an immortal ego in mortal man, independent of the physical body. For the subject becomes quite unintelligible unless we believe that which is a fact, that during sleep there remains only an animated form of clay whose powers of independent thinking are utterly paralyzed. But if we admit the existence of a higher or permanent ego in us, which must not be confused with what we call the higher self, we can comprehend that what we often regard as dreams, generally accepted as idle fancies, are, in truth, straight pages torn out from the life and experiences of the inner man, and the dim recollection of which, at that moment of awakening, becomes more or less distorted by our physical memory. The memory catches mechanically a few impressions of the thought, facts witnessed, and deeds performed by the inner man during its hours of complete freedom. For our ego lives its own separate life within its prison of clay, whenever it becomes free from the tremors of matter, i.e., during the sleep of the physical man.
Great. Should we pause there? So, were there any questions on what we read? There was a footnote, actually. Could you read the footnote, Andrea?
So, footnote 1.
Yeah, it's about Sushupti, the highest dreamless condition.
So modern research talks of a third category of selfless sleep. Could this be the dreamless sleep of Sushupti? Research has said that this state not only involves dreamless sleep, but also a certain amount of conscious awareness of the part of the person that he or she is sleeping. This state may be similar to the experiences of Indian and Tibetan meditators, the researchers said. They suggested that people who are skilled at meditation are more likely to experience this third state, but more research is needed before scientists can tell whether or not this is true.
That's it, thank you. So does everyone remember the diagram that we had in the beginning with the three concentric rings of consciousness? Here we are. So this central white ring is the dreamless condition, apparently. But as Theosophy has always said, and science is now beginning to discover that state is not an unconscious one. There's no brain activity. If you hook up the EEG onto the brain and you go into this dreamless state, the brain is completely passive. But the awareness and perception of the person is still going on. In other words, they're not using a physical brain for thinking and perceiving and dreaming. So that dreamless state isn't actually dreamless. It's that it appears to be so far above our ordinary state that we can't recognize it. We don't actually use the physical brain. We're using sort of astral or spiritual brain, if you like, that actually does the thinking on that stage. And this is quite consistent with the idea of the survival of consciousness after death. You don't have a brain after death, but your consciousness carries on. You may have out-of-body experiences and all those things where you're not using the physical organs. So that's some new research that's very interesting, and it certainly goes some way to corroborate the teachings of the perennial wisdom. Was there anything else?
Evo has her hand.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, is it Ava?
Yes, thanks. Taking into account, maybe someone can mute their mics and backfeed. So taking into account the previous question, if there's something that we can do to be able to hold more up towards prana, and connecting it what has just been said, if we think that in each of these three stages, Swapna, Sushupti, and Jagrat, the other two comes back. So in the waking state, we can train our Swapna state. There is a correspondence there. And if we think about the article psychic and noetic action, the more we raise our point of identification, that we identify with something more than the personality, it is said that even down to a cellular level, there will be a different response. HB calls it a noetic response. And one would assume that when we have elevated our mind in that way, we will be able to resist those currents more and more. If we think about a master or fully developed adept can consciously move from these three stages of consciousness and, so to speak, without losing the awareness. So I think there is indeed a way to train in everyday life so that we can become more aware on all these three planes.
Thank you.
Actually, Will, my question is similar in the sense of asking whether Sushupti is actually the same as the perceiver, which Patanjali is speaking of.
Yes, that's a difficult question. Is Sushupti the same as the Buddhi Manas or the Atma Buddhi?
I would say,
yeah, what do you think?
I think Stephen is right. I think Stephen is right because we, in this quote that we've just read, we drew, we've separated the higher self that might be still linked to our personality with the ego with capital E, which is part of the spirit in us. So that would be related to Buddhi and Atma, to the triad. And that's what would explain why there are no brain waves registered when we get to Sushupti, because it's the spirit in us that's kind of surrounded by other spiritual entities there.
Yeah, thank you. Did everyone follow? Do you follow the argument? So our highest principle is Buddhi Manas or Atma Buddhi Manas, the Trinity. It's in this chart of man's sevenfold constitution, and the three highest states, Atma Buddhi Manas, are purely spiritual. And it's these that are producing the Sushupti state of consciousness. Because normally our consciousness may be down at the bottom within the body, the physical Sthula Sharira. And as we dream, it goes up through these different planes, up through the Mingla Sharira, the astral and the psychic planes of Kama. So the dreaming states really more correspond to prana, or Mingla Sharira, prana and Kama. That's where you dream, and it's probably in Sushupti, which is this upper trinity, that one is really, as Anya put it, the banquet of the gods, the idea of coming into union with all the other spiritual entities. Yeah. Okay, anything else before we go on?
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, we may want also to remember that there is a state higher called Turiya, the Turiya state, and maybe that would be more connected to the perceiver. Just a thought.
Yes, we haven't mentioned the fourth state, which is described as an atmic state, which corresponds to the seventh principle. And that's beyond Sushupti, it's beyond the dreamless state, and it's a very, very high state of consciousness. It's very rare for people to go into that state. You'd have to be a highly advanced adept or Mahatma to get into the Turiya state. Yeah, thank you, Eva.
Maybe just a thought. Would it be correct to think that the more advanced being might consciously guide through exercise, through meditation, through different mental exercises, might be able to access the Turiya state? We all have access to the Sushupti state, consciously, or well, we might not be even aware that our well-being in the morning might depend on this accessibility of the Sushupti state, but maybe Turiya can be consciously, an adept can build a bridge, through his selflessness, altruism, exercises, mental control, self-dominion, and he might be able to guide his consciousness to the Turiya state, because they're communing with gods, don't they?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's given in the teachings, how one would, or what even happens in the Turiya state. Not much is written about it. Okay, well let's carry on So we're going to read the 7 classes of dreams. Could we have a volunteer from someone on Skype who'd like to read? We'll go down to the end of the, the break in the middle of page 3.
I can read if you like.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren.
So are we starting at we may roughly?
That's it.
Okay. We may roughly divide dreams also into 7 classes and subdivide these in turn. Thus, we would divide them into 1. Prophetic dreams. These are impressed on our memory by the higher self and are generally plain and clear, either a voice heard or the coming event foreseen. 2. Allegorical dreams, or hazy glimpses of realities caught by the brain and distorted by our fancy. These are generally only half true. The 3rd type of dream, dreams sent by adepts, good or bad, by mesmerizers, or by the thoughts of very powerful minds bent on making us do their will. And there's a footnote there. It says these may include dreams, which HPB describes when one soul sends a message to another soul. And these account for premonitions and visions. At all events, and in this dream at least, there were no disembodied spirits at work, the warning being solely due to either one or the other or both of the 2 living and incarnated egos. In this case, it was because a man and his wife were intensely attached to one another, and the question of her life or death was of great importance to them. And back to the text, the 4th type of dream is retrospective dreams, retrospective dreams of events belonging to past incarnations. The 5th type is warning dreams for others who are unable to be impressed themselves.
Scroll down, please.
Yeah, sorry.
The 6th type of dream, confused dreams, the causes of which have been discussed above. 7. Dreams which are mere fancies and chaotic pictures owing to digestion, some mental trouble, or such like external cause. Would you like me to keep going?
Yeah, go down to the break, Laurie, please.
Okay. During sleep, the physical memory and imagination are, of course, passive because the dreamer is asleep. His brain is asleep, his memory is asleep, all his functions are dormant and at rest. It is only when they are stimulated, as I told you, that they are aroused. Thus, the consciousness of the sleeper is not active, but passive. The inner man, however, the real ego, acts independently during the sleep of the body. But it is doubtful if any of us, unless thoroughly acquainted with the physiology of occultism, could understand the nature of its action. The ego, when thus released from the physical chains, free from its hard daily task of living with and working through the bodily organs, proceeds to enjoy the experiences of the plane of existence which is peculiarly its own. On that plane, it uses a method and process of thought and perceives the ideas appropriate to it through organs different from those of the body. All that it sees and hears, if we may use those terms, appears reversed from our plane. The language, so to say, is a foreign one, even to the inner language used when awake. So upon resuming life in the body, all that it has to tell its lower companion must be spoken in a strange tongue, and for the body, that is an obstruction to comprehension. We hear the words, but only now and then obtain flashes of their meaning. What we have to do then is to learn the language of the ego, so that we shall not fail to make a proper translation to ourselves. For at all times the language of the plane, through which the ego nightly floats, is a foreign one to the brain we use, and has to be always translated for use by the brain. If the interpretation is incorrect, the experience of the ego will never be made complete to the lower man.
Thank you, Laurie. So there's quite a lot in there. What did you make of the 7 types of dreams? Did any of those ring a bell? Yeah.
One of the best advices I was ever given was to keep a dream diary.
Yes.
And
yes, very good.
Based on that, it's able to, over a course of time, to help identify and clarify the situation, which is which. See. Because sometimes it may not always be clear at the primary moment which category that dream may fall into. You see. Yes,
and as it says, the interpretation of the dream is allegorical. So we're translating it into our everyday language. But that's not the origin of the dream, is in a different language. And that's why we need to record our dreams, write them in your dream diary, think about them. If they're premonitions, then very often if you read them later, you may see exactly what the dream meant.
Will?
Yeah.
We know that, especially in the last quote, there is a lot about the language of the ego, which I think is exactly what we might be actually left with. Yes, if we've got this memory, because I've got some information that this language of the ego would be represented or would be pictured in symbols, colors, harmonies, and geometric shapes. Yes, so hence it might be useful if our intuition doesn't give us the direct link to the meaning, because some people might know exactly what the meaning is, because it will refer to their experience, to their profound belief or something. But sometimes those people who might not make this instant connection might need to note it down and keep a diary. Yes.
Yes, so the whole process sounds very intuitional, doesn't it? One's relying on intuition to be able to understand these messages that we get in dreams. And what you said, Anya, about using sound and color and shapes and geometry, even music, is interesting, because I think HPB says that these are the languages of the elementals. They got color and sound and those things.
And Plato wrote extensively about geometrical archetypes. And that obviously came from his school, from the schools of mystery that he studied in Egypt or in India, possibly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, there's a wealth of meaning in symbols. I mean, even in something as simple as a circle or a triangle or a square, they have a lot of meaning attached to them. Great symbology with just those simple geometrical figures.
Actually, isn't the language, the senza made up of all those symbols? would it be correct to say that it's highly ideographic? I think the secret doctrine talks about it at the beginning.
Yeah. So are there any questions? Oh, we've got a footnote. Oh, no, sorry. We read the footnote about the, yeah, so there's such a thing called dream telepathy, where you can get telepathic messages from people you're very close to. For instance, between, in this case, we read in the footnote at the bottom of page 2, between a husband and wife, and the wife was very sick and she was dying. And she telepathically communicated this to her husband, who then immediately returned home, made a trip back to home and then to look after her. And that seems to be quite common.
There's an interesting question in the chat.
Oh, thanks. Laurie, could you read it?
Sure. Do we pass through REM and non-REM sleep several times? What determines that? So how is REM connected to these other 3 states, I guess?
Yeah, good question. The REM has been, rapid eye movement dreaming has been studied quite a lot. Do you want to answer that, Anya? Do you know?
Actually, I don't know much in the scientific terms about REM. I just know it's a rapid eye movement that modern science associates with dreaming. But I would say that it's probably not Sushupti. I would say it's probably Swapna.
Yeah, I think so.
Because it's still linked to our brain waves, to the body, to the physical body, whereas in Sushupti, it's our ego kind of separates and leaves our body, so there would be no physical reaction to the impressions that we are left with in the Sushupti stage.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of something that Barbara, who's with us online, did some research, and she found some work by MIT, the university in America. They've got a media group, and they've been doing work with EEGs connected to the head while people are sleeping, and they've categorized the different states of consciousness. And if you map it out during the night on a graph, you can see the consciousness going between a waking rapid eye movement and I think they've got different categories of some other different categories of sleep, and then they've got dreamless sleep. And in the dreamless sleep, there's absolutely no brain activity at all. But during the rapid eye movement part, which I think Anya correlated with swapna, which seems to be correct, the dreaming state, there's a lot of brain activity there. And that graph that the MIT researchers, we can post it after the meeting in the Skype group. It shows it very nicely, actually. And you go through many, many cycles during the night of, maybe half a dozen times during the night. You may go into this very high state, and then you may wake up and then go back to sleep.
Maybe that's kind of related to what we call a good night's sleep. Because if, for example, there is noise from the external world and we keep coming back through Swapna and then perhaps falling back into deep sleep and then coming out of it again because of noise or whatever activity was happening, it might be also anxiety. That's why, I didn't have a good night's sleep. Yes, because we did not access for a longer period of time this Swapna stage. But it just shows that it does make a difference on our well-being.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Just a comment.
Yes.
From a neuroscience point of view, we first go into light sleep when we are easily wakened up by noise. Then we proceed into deep sleep, and then we go to REM sleep. And normally we have 3 to 4 of these cycles. If someone wakes us up when we are in the deep sleep, we may not feel rested. So it's a question in what state we are woken up, which would also determine whether we feel refreshed or not refreshed.
Oh, thank you, Eva. So the deep sleep would correspond to dreamless sleep, would it? The Sushupti. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
About the dream type number 3.
Number 3, yeah, on page 2.
Sent by adepts.
Mm-hmm.
Who does adepts refer to? Is it just powerful minds of other people, like discussed with the husband and wife, or does it refer to others as well?
So the adepts in this context would be those who have studied and practiced some form of concentration or yoga or meditation. So there's good and bad adepts. The masters of wisdom who were behind Madame Blavatsky giving out Theosophy were, you could say, esoteric Buddhist adepts. So the right-hand path adepts, and then you've got people who use those powers and forces of nature for their own ends, which are the left-hand path adepts.
So it refers to people specifically,
yeah.
not gods?
No, they're ordinary, well, I say ordinary, they're highly developed people with very powerful minds. And yeah. The Theosophy talks quite a lot about adepts, or masters, they're called. I mean, people like Buddha, or Jesus, Krishna, Plato, Pythagoras, Lao Tse, Confucius. I mean, they're all great, powerful minds, teachers.
And maybe on that note, could you just add those 7 categories that we've just spoken about are not in stone, which means, for example, the dreams sent by adepts might also be warning dreams, or might be also problem-solving dreams. Yes, so they might be related to 4 or 5, maybe not 4, but 5 or 1. Yes, definitely.
Yes, you can get warnings coming through in your dreams. And in fact, is it number 5? Warning dreams for others who are unable to be impressed themselves. So, well, a good example of that, historical example, was Caesar's wife. Forget her name now. Hypernia, was it? Who warned Caesar not to go to the forum that day that they were planning to murder him, but he ignored the warning, and but she was right, and she tried to warn him from a message that she'd received in her dreams. She knew he was going to be killed. So that's a good example of 5th category of dreams.
I think
well, that seems similar to one of WQJ's karma aphorisms towards the end, where one may be warned. That is, the karma can change for an individual where they have been warned, perhaps in a way, so that they leave an area where destruction may occur.
Okay, yeah. And also our higher self may warn us in dreams if we listen to our intuition. Okay, well, I think that's, unless there's any other questions.
Oh, can I just add one thing about REM? It strikes me that as we leave it, such that, and I posted this, I said it seems like the REM levels of sleep are driven by the remains of emotional involvement and attachment to them before sleep. In other words, detachment from REM may indicate freedom from the emotional connections as that connection wears out of itself, perhaps like a mini kamaloka. A better word for it would be nitya.
All right, thank you, Steve. So let's go on. We'll have the next talk now, which is on premonitions and recent research into dreams. And then we'll have a break after that. So the first question I suppose we can ask, well, in fact, Anya asked it in her talk, is who is it that's actually doing the dreaming? Now, if you remember the diagram in the center, in the Sushupti, or the white middle state from which everything radiates out, this is what's called the inner man, your higher ego. So in the chart of the 7 principles, it would be the buddhi manas, the conjunction of the 6th and the 5th principle. And William Judge, whose photograph is up here, he was one of the co-founders with Madame Blavatsky of the Theosophical Society. He says dreams are produced by the transmission into the brain. So in other words, through the dreaming state into the waking state, which is where the brain begins to get active, by the real inner person of those senses or ideas, high or low, which the real person has seen while the body slept. Now, in our previous reading, which we read, I think it was on page 3, Blavatsky, Bright, or actually it was Judge, that unless one has studied the anatomy of occultism, then it's very, very hard to know what the ego, the buddhi manas, the real inner man, is actually doing while you're asleep. So he has his own life completely independent of our perceptions. So in other words, and this inner man is really our true nature. So in other words, when we dream, we become free and go into other realms of consciousness, which we're not aware of when we get back into our body, into our waking state. So that's very, very, very important. So it's this ego, it's the real inner man, which is our spiritual nature, which is the one that does the dreaming. And Judge says that these ideas are then strained into the brain as if floating on the soul as it sinks into the body. That's a very graphic description. You can imagine these ideas straining into the brain as you come back into waking consciousness. These dreams may be of great use, but generally the resumption of bodily activity destroys the meaning and perverts the image and reduces all to confusion. Now, we mentioned the sixth principle of these 7 principles, which is buddhi. And in the Blavatsky's glossary, she says, buddhi is the spiritual soul and is the direct cause of the sushupti, the deep sleep, the dreamless sleep, which leads to turiya. This is the 4th state we were talking about, the highest state of samadhi. Buddhi becomes a causal body in conjunction with manas, the incarnation of the entity or the ego. So what she's saying here is that the 6th and the 5th principles join together and become what's called the causal body. In other words, the causal body is the body which is the origin or the cause of our true life and experiences. It sounds ironic, but when we're awake, we're not actually in the causal condition. We're in a condition of effects. The causes are happening on this much, much higher plane. And what happens during our dreaming and during our waking states is that we're processing and trying to live out meaningfully those spiritual realities which we've experienced during the dreamless sleep. So now this is very countercultural. It's counterintuitive, and science is not really. We'll come to a little bit more to what science says later on, but science is not looking at consciousness from that point of view. In Theosophy, we put these very high states, we call them the causal states, and everything underneath flows out of those causes. Science tends to look at things the other way around. It thinks that the physical plane is the plane of causes, and that creates consciousness. Consciousness is described as a phenomena or epiphenomena of brain. Theosophy teaches it the other way around. The brain is an instrument for your spiritual consciousness. So these are very marked differences between the 2 approaches to studying consciousness. In fact, in the meeting that we're going to have tomorrow on modern views on consciousness, we'll read how science is trying to come to terms with all the evidence that it's collecting from its quite solid research. It's quite meticulous research, and it's trying to understand those in terms of the model that it's currently using, and it's being forced to change the way it thinks about consciousness, and that consciousness is not a production of the brain. It's the other way around. The brain is used as a vehicle for waking consciousness. But consciousness can exist, as we said before, without even any brain activity at all. So during the sushupti states, these so-called dreamless states, we can have very active experiences without any brain activity at all. And that's been recorded. They're trying to research this, but it's quite a difficult thing to research, because you've got to try to work out when the EEGs go very quiet and there's no brain activity, you've got to try to correlate that that time and try to work out what the dreamer, the subject under study, was actually what they were thinking at the time, and that's not very easy to do. Now, what we said at the beginning is that dreaming is an incredibly important part of our life, and it can be very helpful. And what was mentioned before by someone was to use a dream diary, which is recommended. Another thing which was recommended is, before one goes to sleep, is to collect one's consciousness, address your concerns, things you've got flying around in the mind, things that have happened to you during the day, good, bad, or indifferent, and to try to address those concerns and to still the mind. The recommended practice is to meditate before one goes to sleep, and try to address and nullify those concerns and anxieties one has. Because if you go into the dreaming state or into the sleep state with a lot of unresolved concerns and problems that you've taken with you from what's happened during the day, then those will color your dreaming activities. Your whole dreams will be covered by that. And it said that the activities of the day can poison your dreams. So it's very important that when you go to sleep, that you do go sleep in a collected way, through meditation or through study of some elevating book that's going to have a good effect on one's mind. And then you'll go into the state in which you'll be able to receive those messages from your inner self, that's the real dreamer. And he'll be able to, or she will be able to communicate to you those wonderful spiritual experiences that you have during the dreamless condition. And that's very important, because we can get a huge amount of help and guidance and warnings even during that state of sort of egoic awareness, egoic perception. You know, Anya referred to it as the banquet of the gods, which is a sort of poetic way of saying that your higher spiritual soul is sort of confabulating with other spiritual entities. And it's a bit like an almost nirvanic condition of bliss, of things we mentioned at the beginning, the plane on which truth, beauty, justice, compassion, kindness, consideration, all those qualities, those spiritual qualities are ones that get reinforced when we're experiencing things on those planes. And as the first speaker said, I know even criminals, when they're in that deep dreamless state, are mollified in their mental condition. They come back out of dreams better for, if the dreams were reasonable ones. So those things are very important. And the other factor is that during the day, one should try to make oneself porous to messages that you get from these higher states of consciousness. Now, during the day, most of the time during the day, you'll be in the normal waking state of Jagrat, normal waking consciousness. But Theosophy teaches that there is a constant going up and coming down the ladder of consciousness in which you'll be receiving impressions from your psychic and your spiritual states. And that's going on all the time. And during the day, you may have flashes of intuition or feelings or premonitions that you should try to make as clear as possible and to take notice of. Because we should try to make even our ordinary waking state of consciousness as integrated as possible. So we should try to integrate, even when we're awake, other states of consciousness. And what was given at the beginning of the section that we read on the 7 kinds of dreams is that each of those dreams states can be subdivided in their turn, probably into 7 other types, and there'll be 49 different varieties of dream states and types of dreams. So we're living in a very interconnected, interrelated, complex world of consciousness. It's like an ocean in which we're swimming. And we should become as sensitive to at least the better parts of that ocean, and as negative and resistant to the bad parts of the ocean of consciousness that we're swimming in. I mean, it's said that there's a lot of, some people are quite sensitive, mediumistic, and if they travel into the astral plane, which is the next plane above this one, there's a lot of very, very bad impressions on the astral plane. Things that go on in the world, all the bad things that go on in the world as well as the good ones, they're all reflected into the astral light. And some people are quite sensitive to that. And so one has to become resistant or negative to those bad influences and positive or open to the good influences. And that comes, those sort of disciplines, if you like, come through studying Theosophy, practicing meditation, and becoming aware of the differences, and having very refined views about what is important in life, why the virtues that are spoken of in all the great spiritual traditions speak about virtues of compassion, of kindness, charity, patience, harmony, harmonious speaking, harmonious actions, indifference to one's own personal suffering. You know, those are qualities which are spiritual qualities that we should try to strengthen in ourselves. And those will improve our experiences of whatever we happen to experience during the day and even during our dreams. So those, in the Voice of the Silence, they're called the 7 parameters. They're called golden keys. The 7 parameters, the keys that open successive doors of initiation, if you like, or doors to higher states of consciousness. And in each one of those virtues is absolutely necessary for our own spiritual evolution, for our development as beings. So those are some of the main ideas that we wanted to talk about. Well, just one last question for you. Now, people have spoken, and it's quite common actually, we've spoken a lot about it today, of having a problem to solve when you go to sleep, and then you might wake up. Well, Anya described her musician friend who was trying to work out some technical problem, and he dreamt the answer in his sleep, and it happens quite a lot with inventors and scientists. It's very common. A very good example, actually, is Professor Brian Josephson, who works at the Cambridge Cavendish lab at Cambridge University. He's been there for 40 years or something. He's now in his 80s. He won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the Josephson junction, which is a type of semiconductor junction used in electronics, through meditation. And he practices transcendental meditation, and he was enabled through his concentration to see the physical construction of the atoms for this particular type of semiconductor junction. And he got back to his laboratory and then did some work and found this was the answer to the question that he'd been trying to solve, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize for it. And in fact, Professor Josephson is a remarkably enlightened spiritual scientist. I mean, he's a great physicist, but he's also understands the question of what spirituality is, what consciousness is. And just to finish, actually, there's another very good example of a scientist, I forget his name now. He was at Trinity College, Dublin, and he was working on a problem which had never been solved. One of the great problems of science is what produces the magnetic field in the Earth. And he had a very bad bout of flu, and he got into sort of a delirium during his flu bout, and he had a vision of the internal workings of the mantle and the core and the iron core in the middle of the Earth that's actually liquid. And he saw in his vision the electric currents that were flowing in the iron core. And so he then wrote up a paper on this, and it's now the accepted explanation of these electrical currents flowing in the iron center of the Earth is what produces the magnetic field. So these altered states of consciousness can be very powerful, very insightful, and very helpful for us and for science and for the progress of humanity in general. So they are being, I mean, the states of consciousness now are being much, much more widely studied. Just in the last 5 years, the number of papers on consciousness research has mushroomed like anything. It's growing like topsy. So that's about all we wanted to say, just as an introduction to the second study. But we're going to, before we start that, we're going to go from page 3 of the handout. We're going to have a 25-minute break.